This has been so interesting. We have 4 more great stories to share. So next, I'd love to hear from Claire Deroche. Again, we are a fully Claired experience today. She does not get another present at the end, but we are going to hear about a fabulous project that she was able to put together here, right here at Shelter Rock.
Yes, I'm still Claire. I'm going to tell you a story. Here at UUCSR, although we did not recognize it at the time, our anti-racism and ending white supremacy work began in earnest in 2012 when the Social Justice Committee began education on mass incarceration and solitary confinement. Participation in the common read of Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, opened our eyes to the issue of mass incarceration. We began to educate ourselves and the congregation on the history of mass incarceration, how the United States is an outlier in its incarceration practices, and how mass incarceration disproportionately affects Black and brown communities. Even though turnout was often low for the programs we offered, we knew we had to persist. Concurrent with this awakening, a member of our social justice mental health subcommittee brought to our attention the fact that incarcerated people with mental illness were being housed in solitary confinement. Investigation of this practice led us to involvement with the New York Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement, the statewide coalition working for the passage of the Halt Solitary Confinement Act. We joined the campaign and have been working for the passage of this legislation ever since. 7 years is a long time to work on an issue, and many times some of us have been tempted to give up. However, the example of those in solitary and their loved ones on the outside who continually work for change urges us on. In 2015, as a result of the hunger strike by people incarcerated and held in solitary confinement in California's prisons, an effort known as Together to End Solitary Confinement was created as a way to keep the issue of solitary in the public's eye. Each month on the 23rd, symbolic of the hours each day a person spends in solitary, we hold a vigil of remembrance, naming and lighting candles for 23 individuals enduring the torture of solitary confinement. We follow this with a program such as a conversation with a directly affected person or with an educational video. This has given us the opportunity to examine issues of racism and white supremacy on a monthly basis. Again, turnout for these programs is low. There have been occasions when only 2 or 3 people showed up. However, we have not dropped the program because we feel it's important. Even as Together to End Solitary Confinement was getting going, the Black Lives Matter movement was beginning. In November of 2016, Reverend Oscar Sinclair, who was a ministerial intern here at UUCSR, led a well-attended series, Being White in the Black Lives Matter movement. This opened our eyes further to the need for white people to address racism and white supremacy. On a parallel track, our Social Justice Committee was also examining the global refugee crisis. We formed a task force named Courage to Defy Hate and began to address the global refugee crisis. From 2016 through 2018, we held educational forums, raised money for local refugees, and took training to work as volunteers with Catholic Charities of Long Island in their refugee resettlement program. Then Trump was elected. and soon the refugees stopped coming. In 2018, Catholic Charities had to close its Office of Refugee Resettlement. Members of the Courage to Defy Hate Task Force saw that we needed to reinvent ourselves. And in 2018, we became the Racial Justice Task Force under the umbrella of the Social Justice Committee. Once again, we held educational programs, including screenings of 13th by Ava DuVernay and Strong Island by Long Island native Yancey Ford. We were fortunate enough to have him attend our screening and discuss this important film with us. Throughout 2018 and 2019, our ministers preached some challenging sermons on racism and white supremacy. Reverend Ned White reprised the series Being White and the Black Lives Matter movement with updated content. And Reverend Natalie Fenimore offered a program on Black UUs in our, well, that's redundant, in our movement, sorry. In the spring of 2019, members of UUCSR participated in beloved conversations with members of 3 local UU congregations. We also worked very intentionally to strengthen our relationship with the Long Island organization Erase Racism. On the drawing board now is a 3-session educational program facilitated by 2 members of the Racial Justice Task Force and based on the material provided by the 1619 Project of the New York Times. In 2019, realizing that one of our weaknesses was the lack of opportunities to get to know local communities of color, the Racial Justice Task Force decided that reaching out to local Black-led organizations serving predominantly Black communities might help. From our contacts, we drew up a list and began meeting with these leaders. The goal was to discover ways in which we might partner with them. 3 groups stood out: the Elmont Cultural Center, Choice for All, and Liddig House Community Center. The Elmont Cultural Center is the brainchild of Mimi Pierre Johnson and her husband, Stan. Mimi has roots in Haiti and Stan in Cuba. The philosophy of the organization is a hand up and a hand back. Mimi and Stan established the Cultural Center because there is no community center in Elmont. Brown and Black people in the community were losing their sense of identity. The Elmont Cultural Center seeks to be inclusive and support the diverse communities in the area, especially the youth. Choice for All is located in the predominantly Black South Shore community of Roosevelt. It focuses on ensuring that every child has access to great schools, that families are supported, and that communities are healthy. The founder, Jacob Dixon, chose establishing this organization over getting a master's degree at Harvard. The center integrates direct services and policy work that is led by and for the families served on Long Island. In the spring of 2020, Choice for All will move into the Hagedorn Hub, a multi-purpose space for families and social justice on Long Island. A third organization we could partner with is Liddig House Community Center in Port Washington. Lynette Batts, who is also Jacob Dixon's mother, is the executive director. They have many programs for both adults, youth, and children, and in talking with Lynette, I saw many possibilities for volunteer work with them. And in the initial conversations we had with all these leaders, they expressed openness to partnership with us. All of this requires that we leave the comfort of our familiar surroundings and cross the boundaries that segregation has built in Nassau County and across Long Island. I wonder, are we equal to this challenge? Thank you.